All right. Let's get fired up here.
Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Hello and welcome to the next episode of the Actual Anarchy podcast, a podcast where we talk about movies from a Rothbardian and Anarcho-capitalist perspective. My name is Daniel and my co-host is Robert, and we're going to talk about 310 to Yuma today. We have a special guest, but before we introduce him, I just want to mention to everyone that our co-host and host are together, like physical.
Yeah, baby, back again. Once upon a time, we were always hanging out. Then the adult lives come in and step in, and we get separated a bit. But, I'm back here for a couple of weeks. I come up here and record an episode. It's really cool.
Yeah, so if anyone wants an easy way to find the one that we did in the flesh, that's actualanarchy.com/37. And before we go any further, let's introduce our guest. His name is Doug Gregory. He writes for us at the Actual Anarchy site under the pseudonym The Professional Asshole. There's a couple of articles up there that are really good. We've got one more that we're going to publish around the time that this article or this episode gets published, which will be this Sunday. And how you doing, Doug? We've been chatting for a few minutes beforehand, but say hi to the audience.
Howdy. No, I'm doing real good. Thanks for asking. So.
Well, very good. So this was a movie that I believe you had suggested. So is there any reason why this one stood out to you as one that you wanted to do for this kind of show?
I guess the reason is because one of the major issues I see in society, not just as a strict libertarian, but I guess just as a working guy, as a husband, as a father, most fathers are portrayed in media as these, bumbling, boorish, kind of, useless jerks. I mean, whether you look at Al Bundy or you look at Hal from Malcolm in the Middle, any sitcom dad, they're idiots. I mean, they're idiots, and it's only right that their kids smack them around and tell them, like, Dad, don't be such an idiot. You don't know how to handle the finances. I know how to handle the finances, and you barely provide as like a data entry clerk at a low level company or something like that. Like, they're idiots. They're useless boobs, and they're not not courageous. They're not helpful. They don't know anything about their kids. Thank God that the wife bosses them around constantly. Otherwise, they'd actually make the mistake of making a decision on an occasion. And this, I think this movie, I noticed it. I mean, obviously Dan is, the main character played by Christian Bale starts off in this really low down position. I mean, he's about to lose his farm, his entire livelihood, his family really is desperate for money, and they're in serious trouble. And so in a sense, he's starting off like where the sitcom dad lives without the humor. But then through his moral courage, his willingness to sacrifice for his family, his persistence, his endurance, he pulls them out of that hole and actually becomes the hero that most fathers in society, I think, truly are, where they fight, they go to a job they don't necessarily like every day for their kids, and they fight for their kids, and they make sure that their wife is as cared for as possible. And, despite the way sitcoms usually portray dads, they're not these half men who are like sexually inadequate, but actually, make sure that their wives, that they do the dishes a couple times a week and make sure that their wife gets away whenever she can, and really try to fight hard to make their family's lives pleasant as possible and as good as possible. And this is a sort of a real visceral tale of a father trying to show his son, just because things aren't easy right now doesn't mean that I'm not going to take care of you, and doesn't mean I'm not working hard to take care of you. Everybody has a downside of luck. Every guy, life can kick the crap out of all of us. And yet Dan makes sure that his family is taken care of at the expense of his own, spoiler alert, life.
Yeah, spoilers all the time on this show. For sure. I just wanted to say, that's a nice monologue, and you make a lot of good points, and I do see a lot of that in the movie, so I think it is a good one to discuss. And I'll just add to your comment with one brief statement that will sound very stupid, but I've noticed this too in all of these shows like King of Queens and even Home Improvement and things like that, that the guy is like bumbling boob, but the wives are always pretty fit, pretty hot,
Yeah.
Which is kind of bizarre. I'm always like, that doesn't add up. Like, why would this attractive woman want this guy?
Right.
Especially how he's portrayed in the sitcom or in the movie.
Yeah, and it's always because in the end he pulls through in a clinch and he's sweet or something.
So 310 to Yuma, Google description. It's a 2007 crime film, drama film, 2 hours and 2 minutes long. 7.7 rating on IMDb with an 89% Rotten Tomatoes rating, so a lot of people liked it. Ebert gave it 4 out of 4, and 91% of Google users really liked this. So this is a movie that was very popular and well received, though the box office wasn't that significant, only at $70 million.
Yeah, which I really was, displeasing, but unfortunately can't win them all.
Yeah, indeed. In fact, we'll get into that a little bit later, but that relates to our Larkin Rose experience that we did this last weekend. But here is the Google description. Outlaw Ben Wade, played by Russell Crowe, terrorizes 1800s Arizona, especially the Southern Railroad, until he is finally captured. Wade must be brought to trial, so Dan Evans, played by Christian Bale, the owner of a drought-stricken ranch, volunteers to escort him to the train. Along the trail, a grudging respect forms between the men, but danger looms at every turn, and the criminal's men are in pursuit.
Nothing to complain about there. I just want to note that this is a movie directed by James Mangold, who recently did the very popular and well-done Logan movie, which is also another, you could call a Western movie.
Yeah, no, I really love Mangold's style. He knocks them out of the park consistently.
Yeah, we did a Logan episode. I forget what number it was. I should have had that up in front of me. But that was with Ryan Jones, the Afro-Libertarian, and that was a good one.
Nice.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I really did love Logan. Not that we'll discuss it too much, but it's one of only, say, a handful of movies that has all three of the basic hero narratives as its structure, which is great.
Yeah, I think I saw a post by you where you mentioned that about Logan, maybe Dark Knight Rises, and
technically it's all three have it. Well, no, it really focuses more on the second two, but yeah, and just so that I'll describe for your audience what I'm talking about, there are three basic hero narratives. It's hero defeats world, world defeats hero, and hero saves world, usually through dying. And Logan has all three because Logan, he saves the world by saving the new generation of mutants. The world defeats him by destroying his aging body. I mean, he's old and broken down, and it's really he's getting his butt whooped on a regular basis. And then he eventually dies in order to save the world and create a new world that has a possibility for hope. So it has all three of the basic hero narratives involved. And 310 to Yuma actually has two of them, which is great. Dan Evans doesn't save the world, but he does defeat the world, meaning evil. But he's also conquered by the world, and that the world has, even from the beginning, defeated him. And he's downtrodden and can't make a living. So he doesn't fundamentally alter the world or its perception, although he does for his son. So it could even be that 310 to Yuma you could make an argument that it has all three of the hero narratives.
Yeah, I could see that, on the personal, individual level, he's realizing or trying to achieve justice just in his little corner of the world, his own little sphere, just to show his son that he's not this worthless, one-legged guy.
Right. Yeah, and we should, of course, mention that to the audience that, we were talking before the show about this craziness in Charlottesville, and not shying away from controversy here. This movie has a lot to do with the history of America right after the Civil War, because Dan is a Civil War veteran who lost his leg very ingloriously to friendly fire from his own sniper regiment, his own Massachusetts sniper regiment. And because of this, he's a rancher with one leg. I mean, how productive could you possibly be? He has to strap on this fake foot every morning, and it's obviously very difficult for everybody. He's much more dependent on the labor of his children than he might otherwise be, and his wife has to make up for things that she wouldn't otherwise, which is, commented on by Ben Wade. That's Russell Crowe's character, that you have to work your wife too hard, so she's skinny and she doesn't, she's not quite as plump as most guys might like her, kind of thing. So very unfortunate for him. He's just really in a bad situation. But he makes the best of it. I mean, he works twice as hard to make the best of things for his family, even though he's frankly failing. Yeah, in no small part due to the debt he has with Hollister, which we were talking about before. But let's set the scene. What is the opening? Do we have some good notes to kind of start diving into some scenes here?
Well, the opening is just Christian Bale's barn getting set on fire by Hollander's men, who are doing it as a threat, a reminder to get him to pay. It seems to be counterproductive if they actually have a debt to Hollander to make his ranch less productive.
Well, and destroy whatever the value of the barn may have had. I mean, doesn't that, in effect, wipe out a commensurate portion of the debt?
Well, except that Hollander intended to sell his land to the railroad, which was making its way through the area, or about to, right?
Right, yeah. And there's a new book based on a manuscript from Murray Rothbard about the progressive era and the railroads, and there's also a series of lectures, which I'll post in our show notes below, but you get a whole history of how the railroads were making their way west and how much the government was involved in intervening and basically trying to shield all of these players from the market forces, and they ended up, for the most part, failing, except for, of course, the Great Northern Railroad by James J. Hill.
Yeah, no, I think I've read similar things in Bert Folsom's book, How Capitalism Saved America, or the Myth of the Robber Baron, sorry. So, but, yeah, and then, after this barn burning, we get introduced to Ben Wade, who is I guess we see him as this thoughtful criminal, perhaps a sentimental criminal, where the first thing we see him doing is sketching out what looks like a desert, some sort of a desert bird resting on a thorn branch, and while he's waiting to rob a bank, or a bank coach with his entire gang, which includes a sniper, a few shotgun wielders, and against these Pinkerton agents who are trying to defend the coach. And throughout the movie, we get this consistent line about Ben Wade that he is apparently more thoughtful than your average murderer. Because he has this really strange scene later with, I think it's Vanessa Shaw as who's playing a barmaid. Vanessa Shaw. Where he basically just says, I normally like girls with green eyes. She's like, oh, well, yours are blue. Okay. Well, I normally like guys that are a little plumper than you. Oh, you're not very plump, kind of skinny. Oh, that's all right. You look, I mean, you could be pretty enough, right? Oh, you're just sort of average looking. All right. Well, still, I'd prefer if you come to bed with me. And she goes with him, so, but somehow he puts it in a way that's actually poetic enough that you might be sort of confused as to how it worked, and yet it did. So I guess apparently, he's more thoughtful and poetic than your average murderer, but hey, whatever, right? I mean, we got the same thing with the public school system, indoctrinate your kids, but hey, it's free.
Yeah. Send them to babysitting. I mean, you're already paying for it.
Right.
Yeah, Crow's definitely set up as this. Ben Wade is definitely set up as a sympathetic character. At least it seemed to be for me. Did he seem that way for you, Daniel?
In a way, he was a bit of a Renaissance man. Like, you could tell that he was very worldly and philosophical in a way, but also an evil streak within him. Like, he was very nihilistic in his approach. Like, it's might makes right. If I can get away with it, it's okay. I make my own rules. I make my own luck. Other people's lives are insignificant and unimportant, even members of his own gang, as exhibited at the end. Spoilers, of course.
Well, at the beginning, during the stagecoach robbery, there was one gang member who was sloppy, and Ben Wade justified his murder of that guy as saying that he put the whole gang at risk by not killing one of the Pinkerton men.
Right, not realizing that Pinkerton man was still alive inside of their leftover stagecoach. Hey, Doug, every time you move your computer, it's really loud on our side.
Oh, geez.
Oh, no problem. If you can find a good spot for it, that'd probably help.
Okay.
All right. And scene. All right, we're back.
Yeah, so it seems like he's almost got a code that he lives by. It's kind of a famous thing where there's some gang member or a leader of a gang in a movie, and they always seem to operate under some sort of code. And, Ben Wade is no different. He's smarter than everybody else. He's quicker and faster than everybody else. And he has a string of successful robberies, and that's what endears him to apparently his gang. We're not really left much more. What's his second in command's name?
Charlie Prince, and he's kind of the lieutenant, like the strong arm of the gang. He's the weapon. He has basically no qualms about doing anything, and he has this blind devotion to Ben Wade that they allude to and say, he's done so much for us. How can you even think about not springing him from jail or whatever? And they never make it clear in the movie what it is exactly that Ben Wade has done. But Prince, who's played by Ben Foster, he's got this crazy wild-eyed look the whole movie, and he just has this blind devotion to Wade and will do anything for him.
Yeah, I think they seem to suggest that there might be some undercurrent of homosexual attraction or something like that, because keep referring to Charlie Prince as Princess. He seems to have this extremely romantic notion of Ben Wade, but I think it's a very subtle sort of a thing. It's not something they make. They don't make it obvious in any way, but they make a few jokes about him possibly being gay, of course using 1870s language. So I'm not sure. He's not portrayed as a normal straightforward killer. He's sort of he's got some sort of a reason that has to do with his loyalty to Ben Wade that is not reciprocated.
So it's sort of like an unrequited love thing, like he's trying to prove to Ben Wade how much he loves him.
Yeah, maybe.
He's willing to do anything for him to get his approval.
Right. Yeah, I'm not I'm not going to plumb the depths of it or anything like that, but it just seemed to me like they were the unrequited love and the fact that they called him Charlie Princess, I think like three times or something like that, suggests to me they're trying to make some sort of insinuation about his relationship with Ben Wade, that it's not typical cowboy stuff. It's whatever.
And this is right around the time of Brokeback Mountain, right? So maybe, Yeah,
I guess Brokeback Mountain came out in 2005 or something like that.
And Prince does wear this kind of unique shirt that looks almost like a corset type thing, and he does have a bit of a flair to him.
Yeah, he's a ponce or whatever, like what the British would call a ponce. He's somewhere between a fop and a whatever slang you want to use to describe.
His name is Charlie Prince. He kind of dresses like Prince.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. He's got like this. Yeah, he's got a white leather. He's got this white leather. I guess it's a ranching coat or something like that, but it's supposed to protect you from the sort of high plains desert winds. But most guys would just wear a tarp or burlap sack on them or something like that.
Yeah, like the old Clint Eastwood style.
Exactly. But he's got something that's clearly much more expensive and a little more pristine.
Yeah. So getting back to what happens in the movie, so Crow's gang, they are robbing the stagecoach, and are we left to understand that it's a banker stagecoach or?
Yeah. Well, sure? No, I think it was for the railroad. The railroad was transporting money, but I don't know if they ever actually say what the money was for, just that it was a significant amount.
Okay.
Well, it seemed like they were doing railroad construction in the area.
Yeah,
there was all the Chinese labor, like dynamiting and building tracks, so I'm sure that there was money needed for things like that.
Right.
And the more that Wade stole, the more they had to try to get in there, right? Because any money he took would be sort of removed from the pool of the circulation, except for his bar tab.
Right. So Bale ends up Crow ends up driving Bale's cattle into the path of the coach, which ultimately sends it crashing and allows them to get the money. And then for some reason, Bale and his sons are just kind of like clueless spectators of this whole event, just kind of sauntering up there and checking it out. And then Crow notices them, confronts them, takes their horses, says he'll leave them on the road to Bisbee. And then later on, Bale confronts Crow in the bar and kind of demands payment for recompense, I guess, for the 2 cattle that were killed in the crash, and then his labor for the day and the labor of his sons for the day. And Crow's like, yeah, here you go. Sorry, man. Didn't mean to inconvenience you, sort of.
Yeah, and then Bale, sort of double crosses him because he sees that the guys are about to
close in on him, yeah.
He's like, well, now I need even more money. Like, he continues the negotiation. It's sort of like the hostage negotiation. Keep him on the phone longer.
Yeah, give me some more money just for whatever, because I want it.
We're completing the trace.
Right. But it seems like Crow is following his code again, and, he doesn't want to inconvenience, the poor rancher guy who's just struggling to get by.
Yeah, he's not a party to this.
But the big wealthy railroad, he's somehow, morally against. Did you get that sense?
Yeah.
Or is he just a killer, and he's an opportunist, and he sees the money, and he's going to take it?
He seems to have enough of a code that he doesn't want to inconvenience anybody who seems, I'd probably say, weaker than himself, right? So he doesn't hurt women, he doesn't hurt children, he doesn't hurt one-legged cripples, right? But and he gets really upset when Peter Fonda's character talks about his own mother in a less than sparkling way. Later, he kills him for it, and we find out later down the line that his own mother left him at a train station when he was a boy and went back east because I guess living out west was too difficult for a single mother and son. So she went out east and left him there, and he had to survive since he was, a young boy on his own. And you think that would kind of harden him to the position of situations, but I guess maybe it made him soft. Maybe it made him think, yeah, I had to grow up in this rough, difficult environment, but rough, difficult environments make for tragedies, and I don't want to cause anybody else tragedies, but people who've got the money, they can survive having a few dollars pilfered from them.
Yeah, maybe he was the Rothbardian type of the day where he realized that a lot of that money was ill-gotten through protectionist schemes in collusion with government, and he was like, well, there's not legitimate owners of that property anyway, so why not expropriate?
I guarantee that was what was going through his head.
Yeah.
Guarantee.
Especially as he murdered the guards as he was getting to that money. That's exactly what he was thinking.
Yeah.
Now, right as they're in the saloon and Bale and Crow are basically talking, and the posse or the marshals closing in on Crow, and they capture him, and Crow kind of just gives up, doesn't fight his way out. They discuss, and they're talking, and they decide that they need volunteers or that they need help in getting this man. They don't have enough men to safely get him to the railroad. And Bale offers up his services. So let's talk about why exactly he does that. He is in dire straits, like Douglas said at the beginning of the show. But why is that? He owes money to this man named Hollander who lives upstream from him. And Hollander, in an effort to get Bale to, what would you say, sell his land to Hollander or to forfeit his land to Hollander, he has dammed up this creek, which is providing water to Bale's land. Now, in today's law, or in Ancapistan, I think it's interesting to talk about whether Bale would be entitled to recompense for what somebody else does with essentially their own land if it affects you in a negative way. When he initially buys the land, is he entitled to a certain amount of the water that flows through his property? I mean, barring like some sort of act of God, if it's somebody maliciously takes the water away from his property, is he entitled to any kind of recompense? What do you think there, Doug?
Yeah, I mean, this is a legitimate debate even among libertarians, because I remember Walter Block, specifically on the Tom Woods show, talking about ownership of unique natural resources that don't have divisible property ownership or something like that. So rivers being the most common, but the next one after that are coasts and perhaps oil reserves as they go many miles underground without necessarily having one specific owner. We had this difficulty with what was called seepage in the early days of oil extraction, where technically speaking, if you just take your property and go straight down the earth to the center, this oil is yours, but the problem is underneath you, it's like this big ocean of oil that's embedded within rock, and it will seep out of the rock to a drilled hole. So are you stealing from somebody else's land if for some reason you do that? Well, it becomes a legitimately difficult answer. It's not like, our mortgaged house and our little HOA where we have these very clear defined property borders that we know what's going on. It's really something more akin to like, sound or smell or something like that. Can you violate somebody's sense of smell? And, the way Walter Block did it was to say, well, basically the property owners on, say, the Mississippi River would have a share in the Mississippi River Corporation, which would then be run like a market engine and therefore would be used to the best possible extent. Another way I've heard it to be done is somebody just purchases the whole river, whether it be a corporation as its own or perhaps an individual, and then sells the use of the river to other persons. I guess Walter Block also mentioned in the circumstance of, like, say, lakes or things like that one entity or series of entities has to buy the lake and then allow its sublease to tenants or persons who might wish to use it. And this is Lake Tahoe has this difficulty because, of course, people want to get out on Lake Tahoe and water ski, but the residents don't want boat engine noise 24/7. So how do you figure that out? Well, as is currently, we've basically just assumed that large natural resources like that belong to one entity corporation called the U.S. government, and then the U.S. government figures it out. The U.S. government's a monopoly, and it doesn't have regular competitive things. Nobody can come in and say, well, you're not managing the Mississippi River very well, so this board's going to get transferred out and a new board's going to come in. As it is, that's actually about how the Panama Canal is measured, and I've actually had some investments and some business in Panama, so I researched on how the Panama Canal was governed. And technically speaking, the Panama Canal is a private corporation that rents its land from the Panamanian government, but otherwise has a classical board of directors that manage it and continue to make a profit. So, and because of that, it's managed very well. They've just finished having a massive expansion of it. So the new new Panamax ships were even larger than they had been before. So, that might be a real world model that could be implemented over, say, the next 20 years on a variety of large natural resources with no definitive ownership.
Okay. You're a bit of a land investor, yeah?
Land baron?
I have some real estate investments.
Have you ever run across anything like this where there's some water rights?
Not in mine, because I'm just investing in like HOAs in, basic subdivision homes in the Atlanta area. But there have been circumstances in some of my friends' POA divisions up in the North Georgia mountains where they're carving public use, well, not public use roads, but community use roads into the side of mountains, or having water, have a creek that feeds into the Chattanooga River or something like that will be, running through their property, and they're restricted on what they can do with it because that's considered a watershed or something like that. So I have a little knowledge through friends of it, but not my own properties, thank goodness. And the way that usually works is basically if somebody has a creek running through their river that's a part of the Chattanooga watershed, Chattahoochee, part of the Chattahoochee watershed, the basic issue, and Georgia actually has to fight with the state of Tennessee over this issue because the Chattahoochee technically starts up in the North Georgia mountains and goes through Tennessee and then comes back down to Atlanta. So for a long time, the two states have been fighting over who gets the rights to use the water, because the Chattahoochee starts in Georgia, but it goes through Tennessee and then comes back down to Atlanta. So who gets the water use rights? And basically, Tennessee kind of rents it from Georgia is really the way things have worked out. And so they're allowed to take a certain amount of the water, which they've determined on an average year-over-year basis. It's going to rain within a certain predictable amount, and you're allowed to take this amount of gallons of water every year, and then the remainder goes to Atlanta. So it ended up turning into a sort of a legal battle that we have to fight over every couple of years about who has the right to the water. And there's no perfect solution, because on dry years, then Tennessee's getting way more than it should, and on wet years they're not making up for the dry years. They're not paying us back or anything. But ultimately, it's there's not, and there's also a difficulty because there's not enough conservation going on as well, which is what the formation of Lake Lanier was. Dam the Chattahoochee River in order to make enough water for consistent water production. And almost every year we end up having going dry these days because of Atlanta's extraordinary growth. We've gone from 2 to 6 million in the last 25 years. So there's a lot of pressure on a dam system that was built almost 40 years ago.
So, Daniel, let me bring it back to the movie and ask you, do you think that Hollander violated Bale's water rights when he dammed up the creek on his own property?
It sounds like, without knowing a whole lot about the situation per se, is that Evans had use of that water previously.
Yeah, right.
So he'd homesteaded it.
Right.
And then the man upstream decided as a way to fuck with Evan to dam it, try to drive him off of the land. So
right.
I think it clearly is a violation with very limited information.
Okay. Do you think he had do you think Bale should have perhaps gone after him in a legal fashion because of this? I mean, I wouldn't have made it the same kind of movie, but.
Yeah, I don't even know what kind of legal structure would have really been in place. I mean, that's the one thing that you sort of have to keep in mind, is that these are not in Kapistan. These are still under the jurisdiction of a monopoly government and justice system.
Well, you know how Hollywood loves to turn the West, the Old West, into the Wild West, the lawless West, when in fact it was very rarely that. So this is, again, not showing that. They don't make great movies, of course, or maybe they do, but we don't get to see them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Bale or Evans would have had the right to correct that situation. And since it was threatening his livelihood and his life, I mean, he could have taken fairly drastic measures. I think force would have been justified in trying to solve that problem, and especially when Hollister and his men come and burn his barn down. I mean, that's threatening their lives,
right.
Imminent harm.
Very direct way.
Yeah, so, and he did have his rifle, and he never used it.
Yeah, in fact, his son wanted to shoot the fleeing men, and his father, Bale, said, no, let's not do it that way.
Yeah, in all likelihood, it would have resulted in their deaths. I mean, they were a bunch of Hollister men and just...
The two.
Yeah.
The two guys, yeah.
It would have been a bloodbath. But.
Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from. It seems it's a difficult question to answer, because even if for some reason somebody's violated your property, is shooting them in the back acceptable when you have other alternatives available? I'm not really sure. I mean, I'm not going to. I suppose it depends on the. I'd have to think about it a little more. I suppose it depends on circumstances where if you do have immediate recompense available to you, or you have the ability to ask for somebody where it's actually a reliable means of getting somebody to come out and help you, it might be illegitimate to shoot somebody in the back. But then again, if they violated your property, they violated your rights to life and property, then their own are technically forfeit. So
yeah, I mean, once they start hostilities, they don't really have a say so much in how it gets solved.
Yeah, I can tell you if I were stuck in that situation, I probably wouldn't shoot them in the back, only because Hollander is like this wealthy guy, and he could probably conceivably bring more men. And obviously the point is to try to keep my own life and my own property to whatever extent I can, especially for my children. I'm guessing with another possibility might have been just that legal cost was going to be too expensive for Evans, so he would not be able to pursue Hollander in court effectively. Although that might not be maybe that's another problem to solve in Anarcho-capitalism or something like that. But
legal costs are certainly inflated in government monopoly land.
Yeah, terribly so.
And time frames extended.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know how much you guys want to talk about the plot of the movie, or if we just kind of focus on issues associated with the movie. I mean, I'd like to get your take on whether Bale was a pure moral actor in this movie, or if Crow is just a pure scumbag, or anything in between you guys want to talk about. You guys want to just go through the plots and scenes, because it seems like there weren't a whole lot of nebulous moral scenes, like was so-and-so justified in doing this at this point. It was clear for me, like no or yes. So is there any points you guys want to hit on?
Well, I noticed there was an evolution in the characters where Bale was initially standing up for quote-unquote justice, and he started realizing that the white hats were actually not much better than Wade.
Like with Pinkerton, what was his name?
The Peter Fonda character?
Yeah, and all the crimes that Russell Crowe pointed out about that guy.
Right, yeah, and they massacred women and children and said, well, they were resisting or causing a ruckus or something, so it was justified. And I think Bale started to see or realize that they're really not that far apart. They're both using violence and justifying it in their own minds, just in slightly different ways, but the actions themselves are still pretty much equivalent.
Yeah, the movie, it seems to be this relationship between Bale and Crow and how they see that they are far more alike than apart, I guess you could say, and how they at least respect each other. I mean, that's what ultimately the end comes down to, is that Crow ultimately wants to see Bale succeed and become this hero to his son, and that's why he's going to get on that train.
Yeah, but, to back it up a little bit, and Doug, I'll let you jump in a second, it seemed like Ben Wade almost wanted to be caught. He mentions later in the film he's already been to the Yuma prison twice before, and when he does get captured at the saloon, like, he sneaks into town by having the sheriff posse go, as a result of Charlie Prince telling him, the stagecoach got robbed, go check it out, Ben Wade did it. So they get all the posse out of town so that Ben Wade can go to the bar and sleep with that woman, and then he sticks around.
Yeah, did any of you guys have an issue with Russell Crowe not having any power over his gang, like, ever? It seemed like, especially once he's sitting there in that hotel and his gang shows up and he sits on that little windowsill and he's talking to his Charlie, he seems like he could have at any point in time said, why don't you guys stand down? Or at the end, spoiler, when Charlie shoots Christian Bale, it seems like at any point in time he could have said, hold your fire, don't shoot the guy.
Well, he sort of does, but then Prince shoots him a few more times.
But he could have, at any time before that, he could have said that.
Yeah.
At any point, he could have been like, I've changed my mind. Hey, guys, I mean, I know this doesn't make a good movie, but I'm just saying, realistically and logically, he could have just said, hey, I want this guy to live. I'm getting on this train. You guys just chill back, hang back for a bit. I'll meet you guys up. You just come over to Yuma prison. We'll have a couple of beers. It'll be cool. But I want everybody this is what I want to happen, as opposed to what actually does happen, where they kind of have this gunfight where he could have easily gotten killed at any point. Mm-hmm. Either of them could have easily gotten killed at any point. And it was kind of ridiculous.
It was almost like they wanted to play laser tag, but with real guns. And especially when they enticed the townspeople with a bounty, like, all right, 40 or 50 guys whoever kills him gets $200 a man or whatever the number was. And then Charlie Prince and his gang start shooting the townspeople to protect Wade.
Yeah.
But then they're also shooting at Bale.
Yeah.
And Wade's right there. In fact, Wade's ahead of him, like leading the way through like he's a blocker in football.
Right.
And dragging him along. It got like Bizarro World for me at that point. It got a little too fantastical.
Me too. Doug?
Yeah. I'll admit that one weakness in the movie is they don't make Wade's his incentives to helping out Dan Evans' character, or Christian Bale's character, Dan Evans, particularly clear. It seems as though, because Dan says at the end to him, he gives him the true story of how he lost his foot, that it was shot off while in retreat by a regiment, like a fellow regiment soldier. And he says to him, is that the kind of story you would tell your boy? Is that the kind of story you want to go home and tell your son? Because it's inglorious. I mean, I lost my foot. Oh yeah, it was shot off by one of my bunkmates or something like that. And we weren't even close to the fighting. We were just, we were ordered in retreat, and some guy was being an idiot. It's really, and Wade looks at him and it's like, okay, it seems as though he was doing it in order to give the son the impression that his father was a hero greater than he actually was. And since it wouldn't be that difficult for him to escape from Yuma prison, it was sort of like, yeah, sure. I'll let it look like you're beating me up just so that your son thinks you're actually a decent fighter, right?
Yeah.
But then at the same time, his father did actually fight off about half a dozen or so people trying to kill him. Dan Evans ended up killing about probably 7 or 8 men while dragging Ben Wade to the train. So it's not as though he was completely incompetent. He is actually a very good shot. And aside from his leg slowing him up a bit, he was capable of making it all the way. It's just he probably couldn't fight Ben Wade in a straight fist fight. Maybe Ben Wade was tougher in a fist fight, but other than that, Dan was actually reasonably competent on his own.
Yeah, you bring up one point that, now that you mention it, I wish the movie had done that it didn't do, in that they do address that he had lost his foot and his leg, and that does feature into the plot and the reasoning and the motivations behind the character. But you're right. You never see Christian Bale suffer because of the loss of the leg. It's never an impediment. It's never a handicap. Even when he's running around on rooftops and jumping across buildings, he seems to do just as fine as Crow does. And it would have been nice to see that, the foot, the leg somehow come into play in that.
Like maybe take a bullet.
Yeah, maybe take a bullet, or maybe he's not able to jump across a building and then he falls, and maybe Crow has to pick him up, pull him up from falling or something. I mean,
You're saying if you're already in unicorn land, why not go full unicorn?
Sure.
Yeah, they do actually seem to do that twice, where at the beginning, he's like walking around using his Sharps rifle as like a cane to help him get around without his foot, and then he has to like hobble. He has to like rush to shove on his foot in order to get out there and stop Hollander's men from burning the barn, and he can't. And because of that, it takes him an extra 30 seconds to shoot these guys, and he does actually get shot in the fake prosthetic foot. There's a hole at the end, but that was like the only time he got shot aside from the very end is this smoking hole in his boot, his prosthetic boot, which they kind of note, hey, that's whoops. But yeah, no, it doesn't seem to be a huge impediment. It's sort of like it's like an inconvenience or something like that, or it's like I got to put on my glasses before I shoot you or something because my vision's not particularly good.
Yeah, I want to take us back to your narrative overall of Ben Wade being left at the train station when he was a child, and maybe that was part of his motivation for wanting to help Dan Evans look like the hero to his son, because he knew it was important to Evans. Like what I was saying earlier, Evans started out seeking justice within the monopoly justice system, as it were, but then he becomes more inclined to try to like show his son that he actually is capable and worthwhile, and that's kind of where Wade and him can sort of come together and help each other.
Yeah, that does seem to be perhaps a motivation, that he wants the son to have an opinion of his father that he wouldn't normally have had just because his own father wasn't there.
So, Daniel, a side note, one thing I have in my notes, when they're kind of getting to know each other on the trail, Russell Crowe, this is after the dinner, he talks about Bale's wife and how Bale isn't quite providing for her and all that sort of thing that Doug was talking about earlier. Bale threatens to kill him if he keeps talking about her.
Mm-hmm.
Which I am perfectly okay with.
Okay, good, because that was my question. I wanted to know where everybody stands on threatening a man with death to defend his wife's honor. Go. Douglas, you got an opinion. Go.
Yeah, no, I am generally pretty unfriendly to talking poorly about another man's wife, especially when it's, sort of an unprovoked situation. You want to have some meaningful banter. You have to criticize opinions. Okay, that's fine. But, just saying, like, I think your wife would prefer me to you. You're a loser. I'm awesome. Well, that's just intentionally offensive, and I probably wouldn't, advocate killing somebody, but, maybe in some nuance of the NAP and of the non-aggression principle, I certainly believe in a good slap across the face on occasion. Society has become just a little too nice. We need to start slapping each other around on occasion.
Okay. So you're okay with a good slap, but what about, hey, I'm going to murder you if you keep talking about her? Because that's what happens in the movie.
Yeah, no, I think that's taking it a step too far, aside from a little playful exaggeration.
Okay.
But I actually, technically speaking, I suppose it's a violation of the NAP to slap somebody for talking bad about your wife, but maybe a necessary violation.
Well, it's certainly a matter of degree.
It is. I mean, it's one of those things where, almost every guy at some point in his life gets into a fight because he was being a jerk, and he gets his butt whooped, and suddenly it's like, oh yeah, maybe it's not so good that I talk poorly about somebody's wife or mother or girlfriend, and there's actually, hey, you know what, good time to learn some manners, I suppose. But at the same time, manners aren't technically a legal issue. So you guys being the thin libertarians you are, I suppose that manners not being a necessary portion of society.
No positive obligations, but there
Exactly.
are consequences to actions and free association. So if you're an asshole, Doug.
I'm an asshole, but that's I'm willing to take one on the chin on occasion.
Yeah, there you go. So I have a bit of a nuanced approach to this. I would say that anytime you're saying something like that along the lines of about somebody else's mother or their wife, that those are fighting words.
Right.
They're not intended to make a statement of fact about someone else. They're intended to elicit an emotional and visceral response to escalate the situation. So I think that by saying that, Ben Wade was inviting an escalation.
Okay. Where do you fall along the lines of words only have the power that we give them?
I think that there is a lot of truth to that.
Okay.
But I think that it's a fine line between words or violence. I think
Microaggressions?
words can elicit violence. You can upset somebody to the point where they do want to hit you.
So then incitement is a thing? And you can be prosecuted for incitement?
Well, in today's world or in
I know in today's world you can.
Yeah, incitement to riot. I mean, that's a thing.
I mean, don't we have self-ownership, though? I mean, no matter what you say, if you're just sitting there talking.
Right, but we go back to the old hitman argument. If I hire somebody to be a hitman, is it the hitman's decision because
Right.
he owns himself, or
Right.
am I complicit in some way because I offered him money as an enticement to do it?
Right.
I mean, he's an extension of me. He's performing an act that I have requested, I've hired him to do.
But at the same time, he's not under any obligation other than
Contract.
But the contract is invalid if it involves a third party doing harm to a third party.
Yeah, see, we're going to get down in the weeds here, Doug.
I don't know. The way I kind of view it is that you punch a guy across the jaw. Unless you've broken his jaw or killed him or severely hurt him. What, you got punched across the jaw for being a jerk? Well, yeah, that's technically a violation of the non-aggression principle, but it's not a real big violation. In the same way that I would allow women the right where a guy says a fairly degrading or sexually suggestive comment to her that she has the freedom to slap him across the face for it. Most societies throughout history have said, yeah, that's fair game because you deserved it and you're a guy. So what? Don't hit her back because, frankly, you were being a pig and you deserved it.
All right, so let me ask you this, Doug. So you're saying that the punch or the slap in response to saying something like this that is emotionally disturbing, the feels, is a way to teach the person who said the thing that, hey, don't say that anymore. And if a guy gets punched in the face for being an asshole, then maybe he'll be less likely to be an asshole. And that makes a certain amount of sense. But then I bring it to present day, and we've got the Antifa preemptively naming anyone who's not a commie a Nazi and punching them with the intention, I guess, of making them not be a Nazi, like punching the Nazi out of them.
Right.
Something.
Yeah.
And if anything, it's just going to make them hold faster and harder to their beliefs. Like somebody who is disagreeing with me is now assaulting me. Therefore, I am correct in my assessment that they are terrible people. So if anything, they might double down.
I admit that's a possibility. I'd say one of the my response to that would be that one of the reasons why historically it was acceptable for a woman to slap a man who made a derogatory or sexually suggestive comment was because society had already as a whole condemned that sort of behavior. So in a sense, she was just reminding him of his moral duties in that society as a man to her. And I technically recognize that it's a violation of the NAP. It's just not a violation of the NAP that if you brought before me as a juror in a court, that I would judge very harshly. I'd sort of say, yeah. Bring me a murder, or bring me an armed robbery, or bring me a mugging or something like that. Some woman slapping a guy across the face because he said, "Hey, sweet cheeks, nice ass." I'd slap him too, dude. You get the hell out of here,
In line with what we were just talking about, I mean, Crow does murder a man he murders the Pinkerton guy for talking bad about his mother, which is kind of strange because, on the one hand, for all the reasons we've just been talking about, probably shouldn't insult the man's mother. But he didn't really know his mother. She abandoned him at a train station when he was a kid. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, is it just he wanted to murder him anyway? Or do you really think it was really offended him that he would dare insult this woman that abandoned him?
It is kind of a tough situation because there was a mutual respect for each other in the several robberies that had occurred. Like, Crow knew who he was, and they knew each other, and they shot him in the gut during the initial robbery. But, just a flesh wound, right? Not to kill him, just cause some pain.
Just as an aside, he recovered incredibly quickly, by the way. All of a sudden, he was good to go.
I've been shot
after visiting the vet.
Yeah. If you see Reservoir Dogs, or I think some other movies, they talk about how a gut shot is like one of the most painful ways to go, because if it's not treated, you're going to bleed out, but be awfully painful the entire way. It's like an excruciating way to kill somebody.
Yeah, even the vet came along with them, I guess, for that reason, to kind of make sure he was okay. Because I couldn't understand any other reason why the vet was coming along.
The Alan Tudyk guy?
Yeah, why was he there, other than for that?
Like the slight comedy relief?
Yeah, well, and Alan Tudyk is a great actor, so they didn't want to underuse him.
Oh, he is. He's great. Don't get me wrong. Not so much in this movie, but in other movies.
Yeah, I do like the part where it dawns on Peter Fonda that it's Peter Fonda who gets the bullet taken out.
Yeah.
He says, what the hell kind of doctor are you? And Tudyk's like, hey, it's nice when the patient can finally talk back.
Right.
Because you realize he's a vet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess they took him along as like a medic, and they needed more men. It always seemed to be like they were sizing up the gang, Wade's gang versus whatever they could cobble together. They always felt like they were outgunned and outnumbered and outskilled.
Yeah.
And they wanted more and more numbers.
Right. But get back to what you were originally saying before I interrupted you.
Take me back there. What was it?
We were talking about Crow killing the Pinkerton woman, or the Pinkerton guy, because of the woman concept.
Because they did have a mutual respect for each other, but also it was like a high stakes, like their relationship was, I'm going to rob and you're going to defend, and we might kill each other in the process.
Right.
So there was already
it's
on the table that we could kill each other.
Mm-hmm.
And then Wade is in the custody and seemingly can get out of it whenever he wants, or murder any of them whenever he wants. But it was just that one last thing that just pushed him over the edge. Like, you talk shit about my mom, we were already going to kill each other anyway, so I'm just going to do the job now.
Right.
I think we're overthinking this here, like it could just be that Ben Wade was looking for any excuse to like kill these guys so he could escape, like he's trying to piss off Dan Evans by insulting his wife so that he can get an opening to kill him. Kevin Durant's character, he was waiting until the guy everybody got sick of listening to this guy sing all night so he could stab him in the throat with a fork, and so he's just picking them off one by one.
That is true. He didn't need a reason, but I just thought it was interesting because that's what we were discussing.
I kind of get the idea that Wade maybe was so skilled that he wanted to present himself a challenge, like a personal challenge, like, how can I make this situation as difficult as possible and then still get out of it, still overcome it? Because, like I said, he'd been to the prison before twice and he was able to escape. It seemed like he could have escaped at any point during the...
Yeah, it almost seemed like he was like a bored guy who was like interested in, let's just see what happens. There was no challenge in him, and it really was a power dynamic between him and his captors, and that it seemed like, they got this chained tiger, but really this tiger could murder them at any time.
Right, and it reminds me of that movie, The 13 Assassins, that we just watched the other day, which we might do a show on. But basically, a guy who's close to the Shogun is this really awful, awful person who rapes people, dismembers them, kills people. But because he's bored.
Yeah.
And he also runs into traps and into danger that's obviously a trap. And he's like, I just want to see what happens. I want to have some excitement in my life.
Right.
And so maybe Wade has a bit of that streak in him. Like he's already accomplished robbing the stagecoach 32 times, and he's already rich, and he's already
right. Yeah, he had
nothing to prove.
They say here that he's stolen $440,000 out of 22 robberies
in 1880.
In 1880s. Like they talk about later on that Christian Bale's character was going to get $1,000, and that would be like crazy pants rich. So if he's got $440,000 divided up among his little gang of like 10 guys, he's like beyond rich, and there's no reason for them to do any of this stuff. So yeah, he's like this superhero character that is just bored, wants to see things happen that he's never experienced before.
Yeah, it's like Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm bored of this planet. I'm bored of humanity. I'm bored of just being here, so I'm going to go to Mars or whatever.
Right.
Which ties back to a comment you had made earlier. Maybe it was pre-show, Doug, where forcing people to be good is a false being good. Like it's not a virtue to be forced to be good. And that was a point we made in that episode. I think it was 34, where Manhattan was a threat against anyone who was willing to escalate to nuclear war because they would get annihilated. And so it sort of like was this, not mutually assured destruction, but a unilaterally assured destruction. Like if you step out of line, that hammer's going to come down on you.
Right. So you're not being good for goodness sake. You're getting good because you're being threatened to be good.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know. The only thing I have to say about Dr. Manhattan is when you see him in the movie, by the size of his dick, the only thing he's a threat to is Sally Jupiter's womb. He's a certain threat to her cervix, I can tell you that.
And then he can like double team her and triple team her. I mean,
yeah, we're going places that even this podcast can't really go. But it's like you see this thing like hanging out in the middle of the movie the whole time. It's like a Nalgene bottle. No wonder she stuck around for so long.
Right. This guy's super distant and he never lets me in emotionally, but damn.
Exactly.
There was another forced to be good scenario that we were talking about another movie. Do you remember what that was? Was it one that we did a show on recently?
It comes up quite a bit.
Death Star, Rogue One.
Yeah?
The Death Star is a threat to anyone who's going to step out of line. So it's this assured destruction of your entire planet or your entire geographic area with the blast wave. And so you better be good, because if you step out of line, we're going to shoot you down with the Death Stars.
Mm.
Yeah, I remember I likened it to Dr. Manhattan. Like there's a certain level of equivalency between Manhattan and the Death Star.
Okay.
In the destructive capacity.
And in bringing it back into the real world, they say that, giving to charity or giving to help the poor is a virtue. But when government does it at gunpoint, then it's no longer a virtue.
Yeah, you're no longer the moral actor, so you don't get the credit.
Right.
Yeah,
well, and then even bringing it back to libertarianism, lately we've had a few offshoots of anarcho-capitalists who no longer seem to be anarcho-capitalists because they've been saying, well, since we know that the communists are going to come kill us, maybe we should be preemptive about it and go get them first. And then we get these guys talking about, how Augusto Pinochet is this awesome guy because he threw commies out of helicopters. Well, it starts becoming I'll admit the preemption to an immediate threat starts becoming a real problem. Unless it's actually an immediate threat to you, you start becoming the threat.
Right. Yeah, it's the Antifa thing. It's Bush doctrine. You can justify any action by claiming that you felt threatened or feels.
Right. Yeah, I feel threatened, so I'm going to send some drone bombs.
Yeah.
And what you end up making a whole bunch of enemies that actually do threaten you later on. And look, you're so justified in your actions.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, it's a circle.
Yeah, I mean, we really do have to wait for there to be an immediate threat before we can really actually do something. Otherwise, we're not really solving any problems. We're just as you say, not just creating new ones, but ultimately we're creating new collateral damage. Every time you have a victim of a crime, there has to be some sort of collateral damage, even if it's just the world no longer has that person to be a productive worker anymore. The kids don't have a father, whoever.
Right. So, yeah, and it's an ends justify the means argument, which I don't buy that at all. I think that the means color the ends.
Dan?
Evil means, evil purposes, evil results.
All right, good for you. Okay, let's get back to the movie. Let's talk about this one. I've got a couple more scenes to talk about, or at least instances. At one point, Bale's group catches up to the escaping Crow. After the Apache attack, Crow escapes with the horses, and he comes upon a mining group, and he's captured. And then Bale's group catches up, And they come upon the scene, and Crow's being tortured. He's being electrocuted. And the doctor takes offense at this, and he says, well, that's immoral, what you're doing. And Luke Wilson's character says, immoral ain't got a damn thing to do with it. And I was curious as to your takes. I mean, the leader of the minor guys had a brother that had been killed by Crow 6 years prior or something like that. Mm-hmm. Do you think he was justified in electrocuting Crow at that point?
Well, I think Crow made the point that the brother was a scumbag who was doing all sorts of nasty shit as well. So
he's a card sharp.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
He was a lying card sharp. That's why he killed him.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that there's really a justification for torture. You're not.
Well, he wanted justice.
Right, but that's not going to bring his brother back. It's not going to. I mean, maybe it gives him a psychic satisfaction because he's a bit of a BDSM type guy.
Who isn't these days?
Why wouldn't you be?
Well, yeah, I felt it was inappropriate to be shocking him in the nipples or wherever his useless boobs.
Yeah. Okay, so you don't follow along the lines of this is a man who was wronged and he wants justice against this guy and this is how he's going to get it. This is how he finds justice.
Yeah, but he didn't. Yeah, but we have no. I mean, one of the problems is we don't really have proof of it either. It's when we say, well, this guy killed my brother. Wade says in return, yeah, I'm sure your brother was just a card shark. It seemed as though the whole conversation it was just stated, and both they're unreliable narrators. So when you're dealing with that, well, would it be a reasonable proof of justice if for some reason we're just this guy killed my mom? Well, let's actually confirm your mom's dead first. We have to have some reasonable stance at which justice exists. We can't just say, oh, well, I make a claim, therefore, because I've made a claim, it has to be, satisfied. No, the claim has to be proven and unsatisfied, right? And then even Rothbard said, Rothbard would have argued, well, technically they need to prove me guilty, and then I have the chance to come in to a courtroom and prove my innocence first. Like otherwise, it's a violation. Like why should I even come to court unless for some reason you actually have something legitimate against me to begin with? And just because I come to court, you're already violating my time and my space and my property to have me come to court if you haven't proven something against me. But nonetheless, proof is still required, and we don't have any proof here. As it comes to torture, I oppose it. One, because it doesn't work. Two, because why not just kill him, right? It's I don't understand the moral reason or I don't understand a moral reason why you would want to torture somebody before killing them if the eventual goal is just to kill them. I want them to suffer more pain. Well, unless you can show that Ben Wade tortured the guy and then killed him, it's not really justice to torture somebody back and then kill them.
Yeah, and all of this is we're sort of making predictions and assumptions based on a very nebulous concept. I think that it would behoove us to maybe read chaos theory or some other. Well, it sounds like you read some Rothbard regarding this. I need to look into that a little bit, like conception of justice in a private property society, things like that. But all of it's going to be kind of guesswork until we're actually in a position like that. All I can say is that I know that the current system is not satisfactory. It's a monopoly. It's therefore inefficient. It's costly. It has a lot of violence involved in funding it and in its application. And so just because we don't know how something might be solved without this monopoly form of violence doesn't mean that, therefore, that monopoly system is justified.
Okay. I think that's fair. I would like to get your guys' take on what happens directly after that, though. So we've got these two groups that are in conflict. We've got Christian Bale's group who want to take Crow and get him to this train. And we got these minor guys who Crow has murdered the brother of this main leader guy, who want to keep him.
To torture him
and get their own justice or whatever. What happens is Bale's group kind of like violently assault and murder them and then escape with Crow. Is that how you saw what happened? Because it kind of happens kind of fast, and there's a lot of swinging and violence and shooting and whatnot. And I didn't really quite check to see who swings first or whatever, or if even that matters.
Well, I think that we break it down to sort of a contractual level or a homesteading level. Like they had Crow, they lost Crow, they had right claim to Crow. These other guys were torturing Crow and not willing to give him back when requested.
Yeah.
And so they were, I guess, authorized to exact some kind of violence to get their property back, if we're going to call Crow property.
Oh.
But they had like title to him. He was their prisoner. It was their custody that he was in.
But
in the framework of...
They claimed that. Yeah, but how did the minor guys know that? As far as they know, Crow just showed up in their camp and they grabbed him, right?
Yeah, but they didn't dispute it either.
That's
You know,
true.
it seemed straightforward to them. Although, again, we're coming back to that problem of proof.
Yeah.
I mean, my biggest problem with that whole scene is the fact that in the mayhem they caused, they could have seriously injured nonviolent and innocent parties, like, you know, mostly the Chinese workers.
Sure.
I imagine blowing up the tunnel would have done a fair amount of harm, and all the shooting.
Yeah, I mean, you could have conceivably killed a lot of innocent people in order to save, you know, this one criminal who's going to the block anyways, you know, or perhaps is, you know, to save your own life. We had that same issue with the Charlottesville where that guy like drove into a crowd. And, well, you know, he's claiming, oh, well, you know, people were like beating my car with baseball bats and I feared for my life. And so I drove off into a crowd at high speed in order to escape. I mean, I'm not sure if that's even true. That's what's being claimed. Obviously, the original claim was that the guy was maliciously trying to kill people. Well, yeah, you know, the threat to your life is certainly cause for you to take drastic action, but against the people that are actively harming you, not just driving off into a crowd of people who you don't even know who's in there.
Yeah, and there's something to be said about situational awareness. I mean, if you know there's some kind of a riot or big rally thing, like, why are you driving your car down there unless you are willing to kind of be involved, you know? Seems like something you'd avoid.
Yeah, I don't know any of the particulars about any of that stuff, so I really can't comment. I don't know. It seems like a thing that you wouldn't even want to drive down there anyway, just for traffic considerations. I mean, where are you trying to go? You don't want to be stuck there.
Right.
So I imagine we're pretty close to the end of this, so we can start maybe winding this down. And Doug, just here where we at the end we do a rating of black and gold or black and red for the movie.
Yeah, I know. I got it.
Awesome.
Okay, so at the end, there's a scene where Crow offers to bribe Bale for $1,000 cash, which is actually what Bale later on, when he changes the contract with Butterfield, he changes it to $1,000 cash plus getting the water restored back to his ranch, and Butterfield agrees to all those terms. It seems like Crow doesn't necessarily, Bale turns him down because he claims that he wouldn't be able to explain the money. Like, what would I do if I had all this $1,000? I mean, I wouldn't even be able to explain how I got it. But then he goes around and changes it with Butterfield and gets $1,000 from Butterfield. So, does that seem any weird to you guys at all? Like, is it like an honorable thing still? Is he so intent on being this hero to his son, but then accepting the money from this crook guy wouldn't turn him into a hero? But then he changes the former agreement with Butterfield to $1,000. It used to be $200, now it's $1,000. Mm-hmm. But the terms of the contract did kind of change, sort of.
You can renegotiate. I mean,
yeah,
and Butterfield agreed to it.
Right.
Yeah, it did seem a little bit weird, and I think there was a point where maybe the Bale character decided, hey, I'm not going to make it through this.
Yeah.
And because I want to prove to my son that I am capable, I'm going to accomplish this task of getting Wade to the train, to the 310 train. So I can't take the money from Wade to let him go, because then I don't get the brownie points with the son. But if he renegotiates with Butterfield and says, all right, when I die, give my family the money, then he gets to look like the hero and get the money.
All right, I don't have a whole lot else. If Doug, you got some more stuff?
Yeah, no, I was just it is interesting, and my wife actually does not like this movie for this reason. She doesn't like the fact that he did not take a pragmatic approach, the pragmatic approach being taking $1,000 bribe, walking away much earlier, doing whatever was necessary for the direct fiduciary benefit of the family, as opposed to trying to show his son a stand-up moral case for doing what he thought was right at all times and accepting the consequences, even if they meant death. So my wife doesn't like the movie. And I think, there's a major difference between men and women, is that women, in a sense, have to be very pragmatic in life because they're obviously physically weaker, and a variety of circumstances have prevented them from necessarily being as economically viable as men are. When they complain about the wage gap, what you mean is, because, women are the ones who get pregnant and so are more likely to spend 5 or 6 years out of the workforce during their prime earning and career building years. Yeah, what else would you expect? So in a sense, women are kind of forced to be pragmatic with their decisions because, if they're not, they're the ones who are, suffering major consequences for it. Whereas guys, we tend to be a little more abstract. I mean, our brains are organized to be more abstract. We're a little more likely to want to live by a code or a duty or whatever. It's why guys are more likely to join the military, and women are much more relational in nature. They're more likely to identify themselves by their relationships as opposed to by their professions. Going back to whatever pop psychology relationship manual you want to go to.
Doug, just to be clear, you don't work for Google, and you're not about to be fired from Google.
No, I don't work. I don't work for Google. What can I say? A bunch of commies, right? But that's.
Pointing out differences between men and women is a fireable offense. I just hope you know that.
Yeah, no, I understand. As long as I'm not getting fired from here, I suppose I don't really care. And thankfully, I've got enough of my own money that if nobody ever hires me, I don't really feel like I'm not going to be out on the street if nobody ever hires me. Although I hope they do.
All right. Well said. Well, hey, why don't we get to the point where we talk about what is your rating of the movie? It sounds like your wife would have given it a black and red, but what about you, Doug?
Oh man, she'd probably give it a black and blue, I'd say, as opposed to a black and red. But yeah, I give it a gold and black. First of all, they pay for everything in silver, right? It's hardback money. There is no central bank, which is wonderful. There are no taxes, right? People have the right to make as much money or as little as they want or can. I mean, it's basically, this is a libertarian paradise. We should all just go back to the 1870s.
All right, Robert, what do you got for me?
Yeah, so this movie is definitely enjoyable. I give it a black and gold. I wish it was a little bit more explained. I mean, we had to inference a fair number of things, but I mean, you're talking about a movie that's trying to tell a story. They're not going to get into the details and minutia of actual contracts and that sorts of things. So I did appreciate the hard money aspect pre-central bank. That's absolutely awesome. And I did appreciate the fact that you got a male hero who is under extreme pressure and is going to extraordinary lengths to provide for his family. And I don't, like we talked about earlier in the show, the modern male family head is just this buffoon who is just incompetent, and the wife is just putting up with his dumb ass while she's just the most competent person ever, and everybody's just making fun of him the whole time while he's busting his ass to provide for their livelihood all the time. So yeah, a movie that can kind of celebrate and champion the extreme lengths that men go to provide for their families is black and gold for me, baby.
All right. Well, I hate to be the Debbie Downer in this situation, but Tommy, I saw this movie when it first came out, not theaters, but first to DVD back almost 10 years ago now, and I think I liked it better then than I do now. And it's mostly because the back half of it just becomes a bit too cartoonish for me. It's so unbelievable to me that Crow is going to be dragging Bale along to make it through this obstacle course to get to the train. Meanwhile, all these people are shooting at them, and it becomes this laser tag thing, and I couldn't suspend the disbelief any further. To your point earlier, Robert, he could have stopped them at any point and said, hey, I'm just going to go to the train, guys. No need to try to kill this guy. I actually like him.
You triggered? You salty?
Yeah. But then, of course, it's not a movie, so I guess you kind of have to. I mean, that's the thing. When people are creating these movies and these stories, it's like an imperfect thing, and you sort of have to craft it to fit within a narrative that you're telling. It maybe goes outside of the realm of possibility or even making a lot of sense. Right. To be able to still tell a story. Otherwise, the movie's 10 minutes long and you're done. Right. So, final rating. I'm going black and red, baby.
Oh, no.
Man, that's some bullshit.
No disrespect to either of you fine gentlemen, if I can assume your genders. But, and
demi-gendered, dude.
Yeah, demi-gendered. But yeah, that's kind of where I stand on it. And I won't be like bullied into it.
No peer pressure.
Yeah, right.
So, Doug, thanks for joining us. Why don't we'll give you the floor for a minute or two here, and you can just talk about where people can find things you're working on and maybe get in touch with you if that's something that you would be okay with.
Yeah. Okay, so, I mean, I suppose the place where I blog is actually at a website called HQATL. So that's Headquarters Atlanta. And I'll describe what my original vision was for that, and you can call me a sexist misogynist all you want, and I'm okay with it because I am. But I write there for it's a blog that's meant to encourage young men to try to be better versions of themselves. I don't really subscribe to the men's right activist thing. I'm really not impressed by that at all. at the same time, I do sort of talk rather vitriolically of feminism and what I think it's kind of done to society, much in the vein of what we've been talking about here. In fact, I have an article called "The Sitcom Dad" on that website that really talks about this whole thing. I haven't been blogging there as much recently since my dad passed away because I've just been too busy. But if anybody wants to read more articles and a more culturally oriented than what I write at Actual Anarchy under the Professional Asshole, they would do it at hq@atl.com. And the original idea for this is a friend and I really wanted to create sort of a male-centric retreat here in Georgia. And originally we wanted it to be like a hotel type thing, like a country getaway where we'd have obstacle courses and you can shoot and have paintball, and we were even going to have like a driving track and possibly a shooting range and just all male activities that you could have there with a bar, cigar bars, stuff like that.
So it'd be like the men going their own way, Tough Mudder, 310 to Yuma obstacle course.
Yeah, except probably not the men going their own way thing, because we definitely wanted to cater to like corporate retreats or fathers bringing their sons. I'm not opposed to bringing in single guys, but there are plenty of spas where my wife goes the spa all the time, or she loves going to tea houses. And there's so much of that for women, but there's not very much of it for guys. And we're relegated either to, if we're lucky enough, we can have a little man cave or something where we can get the guys together and watch football and drink some beer, or maybe we can go to the sports bar. But there's no dedicated place for this. And we had come up with a bunch of ideas. We eventually turned it into the idea of more of a city club for men where you can get your professional business work done. And we were going to have a restaurant that had like the Bruce Wayne menu and the John Wayne menu. And the Bruce Wayne menu was, it's manly food, but it's healthy. And then the Bruce Wayne menu was, here's a country fried steak the size of your chest. Eat up, buddy.
Oh, the John Wayne menu? Yeah, the Duke?
Yeah. We were going to have like a boxing gym and, a cigar bar and a, restaurant. We wanted to have like a dedicated movie theater where we were just going to show manly movies all the time.
Is Chuck Norris on repeat?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So it was, we're still hoping to develop this, but I wanted to sort of develop a backlog of writing and newsletters and things like that we could eventually send out. But, as I started getting involved in getting my CPA, getting my Master's of Accounting, it's just sort of trailed off because I'm getting busier and busier, and it's getting harder and harder to find time to sit down and, actually talk about something that I'm not repeating myself 100 times. Like, how many blog posts can I have about, how sitcom dads are, not representative of reality, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so Daniel, before we wrap things up, I just want to mention that we were recently on the Liberty Weekly podcast talking about Candles in the Dark with Lark and Rose.
LibertyWeekly.net/26.
Thank you for doing that. That was fun.
And it should be a pretty enlightening little episode there. Those guys are great. They were guests of ours for the Rogue One episode, and we hope to have them back sometime.
Yeah, and there's still one more event for Candles in the Dark. If you're in the Denver area, I want to say, what is it, about like a couple weeks? Yeah, it's coming up soon, and I'm sure Larkin's really accommodating. I mean, at our event, we had people come from as far as Baltimore, Maryland, coming all the way over to Washington State. We had people from Alaska, Arizona, all over, Alberta, all came to check out this event. So, well worth it, I think.
Yeah, so you can find more information on that at larkinrose.com, and we'll post a link down below in our show notes page as well. And you can find this episode at actualanarchy.com/37. And if you like the work that we do, you want to support us in any way, click on any of the Amazon links or check out our tip jar page at actualanarchy.com/tipjar. You can find ways to support us on Patreon, and you can get behind the scenes where you can get before the episode where we're bantering with guests, and when we go to Overdrive and turn frogs gay with Kathleen Turner Overdrive, Alex Jones style, which we might head into right after these messages.
Yeah, these messages that you just invented.
These messages. Thanks for joining us, audience. Appreciate it. Have a good night from me, and we might get into some Overdrive.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
the Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do